Hello and welcome to the episode 4 of Cloud Computing for the C-Suite show with Brad Nelson, an internationally recognized and world's #1 cloud industry expert and thought leader, David Linthicum. This week's show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialist, placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. In this week's show, David and I will be talking about China's cloud computing industry, and that according to Forward Intelligence, by 2020 the market size is expected to hit 686.6 billion yen, or about 103.6 billion US dollars. Hi Dave, great to see you again on the C-Suite show.
Yeah, great to be here. I'm looking forward to this topic. It's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, sure. How's your week been, by the way?
Week's been awesome. I have a bit of a cold, but I've been doing some video recording for Linda and getting those things out of the way, and lots of articles and lots of calls with people confused about cloud computing, lots of press calls, things like that. Pretty normal week for me.
Excellent. So it's a great question this week, and as you say, it's a topic close to your heart. There's a huge amount of investment from China, which is underpinning critical parts of Western economies. But when do you think that the Global 2000 should invest in China? And will cloud computing be a differentiator?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. That's why it's near and dear to my heart. Enterprises looking to figure out what the market's going to be in China, and also it's kind of an independent data point that, since I left Cloud Technology Partners, I've been contacted by about 5 different cloud computing firms that are working with China, that are looking for someone to kind of grow the market there, which is interesting. I don't want to take that job. But it's interesting that there's so much of an interest in actually growing the market. And what's occurred is a couple of things. Number one, businesses realize that they have to, in essence, have good trade with China, and not only sell Chinese products in the United States and services in the United States as well, but also have a kind of also build a market within China. And cloud computing, seems to be kind of the way that's going in there. So they bought into cloud computing hook, line, and sinker. And I would think that the political environment there and the government would probably have an issue with that, but they don't seem to. There seems to be a pro-growth strategy in China, which is good to see, and the relationships with the United States, seem to be fairly robust, and not getting into Korean sanctions and things like that, North Korean sanctions and all that stuff that's going in the political world. It looks like a place that I would invest, and so of course it depends on what you do as a business, and so. If you're a cloud-based company, it's a no-brainer. You have a services company and a cloud-based company, and certainly, AWS sold their Chinese business to somebody else so they could actually get into the Chinese market a lot faster than they could just being AWS. There's Alibaba, which has grown the market within China. Microsoft is in there, and lots of people are in there. And the Chinese companies are absolutely chomping at the bit to build cloud-based systems going forward. And people are looking at that as a kind of a common platform to have this frictionless exchange with China. There's still a lot of paper, fax machines, things like that, that we need to employ to do business with China, and that's just too slow for the American economy. We have to have this ability to basically automate the trade between the two countries, whether it's Australia and China, or US and China, or Europe and China. And cloud computing seems like a jumping off point where we can agree upon a platform everybody can leverage, common databases, common security systems, things like that, which would remove some of the security concerns, would allow different governance, I think would satisfy the Chinese government in terms that there's no shenanigans going on and we're living and complying with their rules, and be able to comply with the US rules, with the European rules. And everybody will, in essence, get into a happy cloud computing circle and allow the cloud, in this case, infrastructure as a service providers like Alibaba and AWS and Microsoft, to facilitate the trade. And by the way, we can do this through using shared infrastructure, which is virtual in nature. We don't have to do database integration across the ocean with lots of latency. So the opportunity is there. So my advice, generally speaking, to the Global 2000 is invest. Of course, it depends on what they are. And I think cloud computing will be a differentiator. It's going to be something that's really going to provide the platform for success with trade with China. And I just can't wait for that to occur, because I think a lot of US companies are going to be profitable based on that. A lot of Australian companies, other companies that actually do a lot of business with China, and certainly the US does a ton.
Yeah, exactly. I think that China, and as you just said, they hold a massive opportunity within cloud computing, and I think it's just been a huge amount of apprehension with regards to foreign companies using cloud providers in China. In your opinion, actually, it'd be interesting with your experience of the APAC regions. Where do you see the immediate risks in the next 12 to 18 months with investment into China?
I think the political risks are significant. So we have the U.S. that's trying to put pressure on China to bring sanctions against North Korea. They obviously do a lot of trade with North Korea, based on all the nuclear testing that's been going on, including I think yesterday morning. If they decide to not put sanctions on them, and there's some sort of a move to counter that on the U.S. side in terms of doing trade with China, limiting trade with China, then the businesses are typically the ones who get hurt. And I think that, that would be a risk. And I would put that in the negative column, where we're looking at this. I think chances of that are very small, just because of the administration and their kind of stance on this, on trade and things like that. But it's still going to be a potential issue. And some conflict breaks out, all those sorts of things would get in the way of this. So, just like, everything else having to deal with trade with one nation to another, politics is everything. And it's the total risk in terms of businesses' inability to actually do what businesses want to do, including Chinese business, U.S. businesses, Australian businesses.
It'd be interesting to see what the next 12 to 18 months provides us with regards to how North Korea develops with with Trump and the Trump administration, and how they deal with that, with the impact that will have on China, wouldn't it really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's not a political thing. It just really comes to be a business environment, and you're dealing with the Chinese government, which can be a little limiting at times in what they do, and certainly in the past has certainly proven that out. But those are the risks we're getting into. But you get into those risks when you deal with any trade between different foreign powers. But in this case, it's probably a little bit more volatile than I would think it to be. So that would be something I would look at in terms of adding risk to this equation. But I think the benefit may outweigh any kind of cost of risk that we assess.
Yeah, exactly. And it is business at the end of the day, and it shouldn't really be political. But unfortunately, with the way China, the US, and North Korea are at the moment, it really can't be anything but a little bit political at the same time, can it? When it comes to such data issues and breaches and leaks and things like that.
Yeah, it's always going to be politics and associated, and there's technopolitics associated with this as well. In other words, different capabilities that are being built into Amazon and built into Microsoft Azure. Will they be allowed in China? Based on their ability to put restrictions on technology, information dissemination, some of the social media stuff, some of the chatbot stuff that's going on, the ability to use machine learning. I mean, all that stuff's not necessarily harmful unto itself, but it may be scary to governments that don't yet understand them. And so the reaction is going to be to shut them down until they do understand them. I think cloud computing is really kind of coming into its own, after 10 years of being relevant in China. So those sorts of things are going to pop up as well. And so we may end up having a subset of what Amazon offers, what Microsoft offers, what Alibaba offers within those countries, just kind of based on the fact that they're concerned about upsetting the government and having pushback on the government, and the government actually shutting them down.
Yeah, sorry, I had a problem there with the computer, but I think it's a learning curve for the Chinese government as to how the Western world are developing their technology to engage with the public, and I think there's potentially a whole level of fear about that. The Chinese population being able to interact in the circumstance of the Western population, and I think they want to have more control over that, don't they, as you just rightly said, and certainly don't necessarily want computer programs or chatbots or any form of artificial intelligence second guessing or influencing too many decisions of the Chinese population. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. But at the same time, I mean, they build pretty much every phone that's sold in the United States, and lots of the routers and servers and network devices, things like that. So they're definitely technologically enabled. I just think that everybody's suspicious of each other still. Obviously, there was a moratorium on buying, Chinese built hardware for a time from the government because they were concerned about, malware and viruses being spread by, being embedded in the firmware of these routers. I don't think any of that really kind of came around because both of the countries are interested in becoming profitable. But there's always going to be this, spy versus spy mentality that's going to be part of China and the United States, just like China and Russia, and China and the United States and some of the other, people that they've competed with in the past.
Yeah, they're absolutely right. There's always, as long as there's war, there's always going to be, as long as there's going to be physical war, there's always going to be that sort of cyber war, as it were, and trying to infiltrate technologies in order to siphon off as much information as possible. Wow, it sounds like a bit of a conspiracy theory this show's turned into now. I hope the C-suites are still watching it.
Yeah, there's going to be many layers to this argument. Obviously the hackings, the security, all that stuff's going to get brought up. But the reality is, like I said, there's more money to be had within China. The market is extremely large. And if you're not a Global 2000 company that's looking at that market to expand your business, either through production or sales into that market, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. The Chinese economy has been sophisticated, over the last 20 years, and the middle class has kind of grown in China. There's and they're dying for Western products, and obviously we'd like to provide them those Western products, and so we have to have the capability of doing that and get around the political issues and the technological issues. And I think cloud computing really kind of get in there as kind of an icebreaker in terms of how we deal with technology and how we exchange information.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. I completely agree. And thank you for being part of the C-Suite show this week. Great to have you.
My pleasure.
Well, thanks for watching, everyone. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe on this conversation, because it's really interesting. Although it brings up lots of different aspects of development into China, and it'd be great to know what questions you have around that. And you can always contact David on Twitter, which is at David Linthicum, and myself on Twitter as well, which is at Nelson_Hilliard. So thanks again for watching, and please like, subscribe, comment, and share this video with your friends and with your colleagues.